Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfix. This will be the continuation of the Mystery of Midoriya Izuku. This will be Part 6, Chapter 6, entitled Night 3. Slow cookers, Shota believes, are one of the greatest inventions known to mankind. Yes, he's willing to fight someone on this. You just throw a bunch of ingredients into the pot, let it simmer for like 8 hours, and come home to a delicious meal. It was, aside from the rice cooker and the coffee maker, the most invaluable tool in the Yamada Aizawa household. Shota starts the rice cooker and tastes the curry that Hizashi had thrown together to cook in the morning from the slow cooker. Warm enough for Shota's love of spice, but not too hot that Hizashi will have to chug his coffee creamer in search of sweet relief. Again. Shota stretches out on the couch with Bastard joining him, settling on top of his stomach to nap. Shota tilts his head back, eyes half closed, ready for his own cat nap before the rice cooker goes off. Of course, even with the long day, he still got a decent amount of sleep the previous night. Well, a decent amount of sleep for him. Either way, the whole affair becomes an exercise in pointlessness. He reaches for his phone instead, fingers tracing the plain black case as he opens his apps. There's an email from Mahima, who is fine with Bakugo's extended after-school stay and cleaning up the design studio. Hatsume's apparently been in fine form, making lots of work for him. There are 2 other emails from Midoriya's elementary and middle schools, respectively, with principals agreeing to meet with Shota tomorrow. Finally, an email from Shinso, who appears to have gotten over his stomach flu, and he'll be back in school. Shota replies to his protege first, saying that they will not have physical training until next week, mainly because he knows that the kid will insist that he's fine when he's really not. Rather than being an empathetic crier, Shota has, of all things, an empathetic gag reflex, which is objectively worse than the crying. He doesn't want to deal with Shinso throwing up and the ensuing lecture from Recovery Girl. Yeah, no thanks. Instead, Shota sends Shinso some of the analytical exercises that the Hero Course kids have been working on to make up for their missed physical training. While the kid may no longer be sick, the reply email sounds almost relieved at not having physical training. Shota thinks that one of his students may actually learn something like common sense after all. Did he think that person would be Ida? Yes, he did. Then Ida went off on a revenge mission against Stain and Hosu. This is around the time that Shota resolves to pay more attention to the class of demon children. So, Nomuri told me that you talked with her today, Hizashi says over dinner. I talk with Nomuri multiple times a day, but I don't want to hear her suggestions for our sex life. Hizashi snorts at that. She was talking about the little listener. You've had a bit of time to really observe him since I brought it up, Shota says, looking at his husband. What do you think? I think Midoriya has trauma related to authority figures in his life, he responds succinctly. He tries to make himself small, unnoticeable, versus actually acting out, which is the route that I went. No one looks at pro-hero present Mike, gregarious and charming, and thinks that he was bullied as a kid. That would be wrong, though. Just because voice is a powerful quirk, it doesn't mean that Hizashi had an easy time in school for it. His control over his ability was shaky at best, rendering a couple of members of his family hard of hearing. Shota has had a crash course in various brands of hearing aids worn by those in the Yamada family. Teachers are fickle with those sorts of powerful quirks as well. Hizashi was encouraged not to talk in class. Not to mention about a case about 20 years old, of a teacher forcing a muzzle on a student with a voice-based quirk. It's something of a landmark case, making such treatment highly illegal. No one except for Shota and 3 others know that the nameless muzzled student in that case was Hizashi. So if anyone could understand trauma related to authority figures, teachers especially, it would be his husband and Shota himself. Rather than making him small, it just made him louder and more of a showman. If they wanted him to shut up, then Hizashi would do the opposite. Those showman tendencies were eventually redirected into present Mike. Between that and therapy, Hizashi was a lot better than he was as a kid, and Shota himself went down the small, unnoticeable route. Right up until he made himself noticed, usually by fighting a bully. Speaking of bullies, I think Bakugo was Midoriya's bully when they were growing up. Hizashi lets out a tiny hiss at that. Not in his file? I haven't seen Bakugo's unrestricted file, but based on my own observations amongst others, I think we misread the situation between the pair, though I'm guessing that since Bakugo had been given the perfect quirk for heroics, we'll see a clean record. In the kids that Shota's expelled over the years, many of those with the perfect quirks tend to have clean records and bad attitudes. For a select few, the expulsion, the death of their dream, is enough to sort of wake them up and put in the work to change for the better. For others, they don't change, and either stay in Gen Ed or transfer out to other schools. Not that other heroic schools would want anyone who's been expelled from UA, though, no matter the quirk or the supposedly clean record. Other hero schools know the tricks just as well as UA does, but without a psychological assessment as a clear black mark on an applicant's record, there's not much that they can do about the problem, unfortunately. Still, it's a symptom of a system that sets Shota's teeth on edge, how quirks determine a person's worth in the end, or at least that's how it is in society's eyes. There are other considerations over power in many pro-heroes' opinions, not that school boards or the Heroics Commission would actually listen to them, of course. God forbid, they actually listen to someone who works in training young heroes rather than being enamored by power. It's part of the reason why this class is, mostly, a breath of fresh air to Shota. Their love and support toward one another, toward others, it's nothing short of astounding, really. It's definitely something that Shota plans on continuing to cultivate. Empathy, intellect, cunning, kindness, these go hand in hand with being a true hero. With this class, these kids, who knows, maybe they'll see the system and force a change of their own. They're certainly stubborn enough for it. Now he just has to make sure that they survive UA in order to do so. Do you think that you'll expel him? Hizashi asks, bringing him back to reality. And isn't that the question of the hour, or, well, becoming one of the major questions of the hour anyway? Shota sighs, running his hand through his hair. I don't know. Mineta definitely, if he doesn't shape up on his perverted ways by the end of training camp, and then he's getting the boot. I don't care who he's related to on the UA board of directors, and Nezu will back me up. Bakugo, on the other hand, he's a bit more social than he was at the beginning of the year. He'll work with Kirishima at least. He has potential. Hizashi hums thoughtfully. But there's his temper, attitude, and Midoriya. Yeah, I'm sending him to Hound Dog for a session. Hopefully he'll recommend anger management for the kid. Usually a kid could opt out of such a recommendation, except for Hero Course students. Not if they want to participate in hero classes. Maybe getting Bakugo the tools to deal with his anger is what he needs along with discipline, because the kid does have potential, but he's also in need of a wake-up call as well. Anyway, how did that interview with Edshot go? He asks, changing the topic to work that doesn't involve his hellions. Hizashi, proving to be the best husband, runs with the change of topic quite happily. I'm starting to think that you're seeking me out, Eraserhead, Midoriya says 15 minutes after Shota lands on his rooftop. There's barely a stutter in the rather bold statement from his student, which is new. You keep giving me hot chocolate, Shota responds with, as a shrug, and he takes the mug. His student huffs out a laugh, eyes bright in the moonlight. I can give you the brand name. I bet Yamada-sensei would like it. Midoriya answers with a sly grin. Shota doesn't choke on his hot chocolate, but it's a near thing. His and Hizashi's marriage isn't well known amongst his students. What do you mean? Problem Child then raises an eyebrow, but he hears the challenge in Shota's voice all the same. I pay attention. You and Yamada-sensei are good, careful, but I see the way you two look at each other. I saw the way that he was after the USJ. It wasn't that hard to figure out. People in love. He flushes and shrugs. They look at each other different is all. He sounds a bit wistful. Shota thinks that, given the looks he's seen Todoroki give Midoriya, he's unsurprised. Shota huffs out something that could be a laugh instead. Well, congratulations then. You got extra credit in both mine and Mike's classes for next term. It's been a long-standing promise between the pair. When a student figures it out and approaches one of them about it, then that kid will get extra credit in their classes for the term. Since this term is almost ending, they'll have to roll it over to the next one. Hizashi will be thrilled, though. The kid jerks back, turning to him with a confused expression on his face. What? None of our students ever caught on to it, or at least never outright asked. Think you're the first. So we said that if it ever happens, then that person would get extra credit for the term. Since this one's almost over, we'll roll it on to the next one. Midori stares at him with wide eyes. And no one caught on? Shota grins. Nah. Congratulations, though. Mike will be thrilled. You're already one of his favorite students. The problem child looks down at his mug of cocoa. His cheeks turn bright red at that statement. It's true, though. Hizashi's very fond of Midoriya. Shota leans back to sip his. He eyes the kid before deciding to slowly broach the Bakugo topic. Good work today with your spars. You think so? I wasn't being cowardly with Kacchan. Shota sighs. Bakugo has a very narrow idea of what a fight will entail. It's more than just two people punching each other, and in heroics, things are rarely going to be fair, in any sense of the word. You use your capture weapon to make sure that no one can touch you, Midori says, looking at the landscape of the buildings and power lines. And when they get in close, you rely on quirkless combat through the use of your quirk, but mostly it's stealth and sneak attacks, surprising them and knocking them out before they even know that you're there, right? It reminds me a bit of like a snake in the grass. Not that that's a bad thing, of course. No one notices a snake until they strike. Huh, that's a pretty good breakdown of his style. The metaphor isn't that bad either. Shota feels his mouth stretch into a grin. Now that's impressive, kid. The blush on his student's cheeks turns a deeper red. There's something pleased about it, though. I like heroes and analyzing them. There's a couple forums on underground heroes as well. From what few clips there are, plus what I've seen, it makes the most sense. It's really impressive, Eraserhead. And that was impressive what you did against Bakugo. Midoriya, do you know why I almost expelled you on the first day? Midoriya bites his lip. Because you saw a student with a powerful quirk and the ability to not control it. Right, and do you know why I decided otherwise? I had potential. Shota nods. And you showed that by thinking and adapting to your situation. That's what I look for with heroic potential. You showed that today as well. Sometimes you can't run into a situation head-on. You need to think it through instead. Your mind, more than your quirk, Midoriya, is your greatest asset. Green eyes snap up at that, a slight quiver in his voice. You think so? Shota nods. The kid searches his voice for a long moment. Do you think... Would you think that if I was quirkless? He asks, in his voice is small and shaky. Midori doesn't know that Shota's seen his file. He doesn't know what Shota knows. Even so, Shota has an answer, and it would be the same if he didn't know what he knows. One day, even with the dropping rates of quirkless populations, he knows that there will be someone that will never know the feeling of power that lives in their skin trying to get into UA and trying to become a hero. Even if he didn't have all this information, Shota still knows exactly what he would have said anyway. A quirk is a tool, he says simply, almost gently. He feels like this may be what gets Problem Child to trust him, so he needs to be honest. Like every tool, there are pros and cons to them. I won't lie and say that a quirkless person wouldn't have some disadvantages, but so does everyone else. Not that people ever want to say it, too enamored with the power that's within them, but to answer your question, you have your compassion and your kindness and your empathy. You're smart, Midoriya, and come up with sound strategies. Even if you never had a quirk, I think that you would still be my student. I think that you would still have been a hero, even quirkless. Midoriya stares up at him. He's perfectly still, so still that Shota's actually a bit concerned. He reminds Shota of a computer that's being restarted, and then the kid suddenly moves, setting the mug down before throwing himself around Shota's waist. Shota barely has time to brace himself, because for a relatively short kid, Midoriya is heavy with muscle. He buries his face into Shota's chest and sobs. They're half hysterical, and are unlike Midoriya's other tears. No, these sobs remind Shota of someone who really thought that they were going to die, but didn't. All their shock and joy and fear being released all at once. Shota's never been good with crying people. He's gotten better with them over time, but he doesn't really do comforting. At least not as well as Hisashi. Still, he gently puts a hand on Midoriya's back and rubs circles into it like he remembers his mom doing when he was little. Eventually the kid quiets down and pulls away from Shota, wiping his eyes on his sleeve and pulling out a pack of tissues from his All Might hoodie. He seems so exhausted by the crying, and he's forgotten to be embarrassed, like he would sometimes get. I'm sorry, Midoriya whispers. I didn't get my quirk until the entrance exam, so I was going to try and be the first quirkless pro, and I guess I needed to hear that. Thanks. Shota knows this, of course, but he knows this is a big deal. This is Midoriya actually trusting him, even a little bit. This is something that Shota wants to encourage. Thank you for telling me, Problem Child, he says, resting a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry that I didn't know about this sooner. I would have tried a different method of teaching you, but for only getting your quirk so recently, you've made amazing progress. There's a blush on the kid's face, but something else. Something like pride or a glow, like he wants to enjoy getting praise from an adult that he feels isn't obligated to praise him. Tomorrow, though, we'll talk about adding some training to your schedule. Don't look so crestfallen. You'll be with Kaminari and Aoyama too. I honestly should have done this sooner, Shota says. I apologize that I didn't. You don't have to apologize to me, Eraserhead, he responds. I do, he reaffirms. Because you needed help, and I should have found a way to get it to you sooner, Midoriya. And because when someone makes a mistake, they apologize and move on. They try to be better for it, learn from it. Just because I'm the teacher here doesn't mean that I'm infallible. The kid swallows again, looking like he wants to cry, but he's too exhausted and out of tears to do so. Shota's awarded with a tremendous smile instead. You're a pretty great teacher, Midoriya says with red-rimmed eyes. I don't think I've ever had one like you before. And oh, doesn't that land a sickening sort of feeling in Shota's stomach. You should have, Midoriya, he says. The kid grabs the mugs, and he stands walking to the door, like he's just done for the night, and he wants to walk away and sleep. Shota feels that. He got some of what he wanted. Not all of it. He still didn't get confirmation of Bakugo's bullying, but Midori trusted him. I like it when you call me Problem Child, he says, finally looking down at the door handle. It's like when Uraraka-chan calls me Deku, or when All Might calls me my boy. It's nice. Shota thought the same thing when he was called Problem Child as a kid himself. It was the person that made it feel right over everything else. Shota feels something warm curl in his chest at that. The sick feeling from Midoriya's previous admission washes away. These kids are going to be the death of him. But really, there's probably no other way that he would prefer to go, except in a bed surrounded by his loved ones. Good night, Problem Child. Good night, Eraserhead. Stay safe. Shota launches into the air after Midori closes the door behind himself. He thinks that the kid may finally trust him, at least a little bit. All right, everyone. This concludes Chapter 6 of The Mystery of Midori Izuku. Chapter 7 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.